mean, it's so clear from this current president that his hate for immigrants and his disdain for foreign-born citizens who are productive and working here is just not the kind of talk and what you want to hear, especially when you know that for our daughters, they know that their father is in fact an immigrant, someone who has worked hard his whole life to realize the American dream, to start a business, a successful business at that. So it is disappointing, but there is also infinite hope.
Welcome to the GigRoots podcast. GigRoots tells the story of grassroots economics in America. Each episode, we speak with the people who are working toward community transformation at the grassroots level. During our third season, we've partnered with Welcoming America to help share the stories of foreign-born peoples who have come to call America home. Welcoming America is leading a national movement of cultivating inclusive communities. They work with nonprofits and local governments, providing tools and resources to help make cities places where everyone can belong. Through their network, we've spoken with local leaders and business owners actively contributing to strengthening their communities. If you'd like to know more, you can go to their website at welcomingamerica.org. This episode, we're in St. Louis, Missouri. St. Louis is known for good food and great music. It's also been home to some notable folks like John Goodman, co-star of Roseanne, Jenna Fischer from TV's The Office, and Sterling K. Brown, who starred in the hit series This Is Us. It's also home to Julio Zegarra-Ballon. He's a business owner originally from South America. Julio has carved out a particular niche providing handcrafted fair trade goods. He would have not been able to do so without help from some key relationships through several locally run initiatives. If you hadn't gone through that program, that you might not have gone into business for yourself.
I might not have. I don't know that I would have had the courage and the confidence to do it.
That's what's coming up on the GigRoots podcast. Let's get started. Julio Zegarra-Ballon came to the U.S. from the country of Peru in 1990. This was shortly after he had graduated college and after he met his American-born wife, who had spent 3 years in the country, initially through an exchange program that had become a much longer stay. The couple began their lives together during a period of heightened civil unrest in Peru. The ongoing conflict is between the Peruvian government and the Communist Party known as the Shining Path. Though recently dormant, this conflict has lasted for over 40 years and is technically still going on today. Though not quite the same as his native country, the U.S. is now experiencing its own form of civil unrest. Julio and I were able to discuss all that has happened in life and in business over these last 30 years. Julio, wonderful to meet you, sir. I've heard so many wonderful things about you and your experience. Can you tell me a little bit about ZB Market?
Yeah, ZB Market in the simplest form, it's a retail business that focuses on selling handmade, artisan-made, and fair trade products from around the world. That really is, it's just a business like you would say Whole Foods or you would say Macy's. And it is small scale, obviously, but it focuses exclusively on selling fair trade and handcrafted goods from around the world.
What kinds of things do you sell in your store? What type of products?
You will find pretty much everything. It's a boutique. So we have lots of giftables. For the women, you've got accessories with jewelry and handbags and wallets. We have dresses and apparel. We have kids products from soft toys to puzzles and dresses and things for kids. We have a huge collection for the home area and where we do a lot of wedding gifts in particular. So there's tableware, kitchenware. You've got linens. We have what I call the market is we have organic and fair trade coffee and chocolate and tea, spices, and a few other consumables. Let's see, what am I missing? Kids, home, accessories, jewelry, all of that.
Sounds like a lot of different things.
Yeah, garden. There's a whole section for gardening. We have baskets, from Africa and Bangladesh and India. So we're currently sourcing products from 33 different countries. We've got about 1,300 items. They're all available in our stores. We have 2 bricks and mortar stores based in St. Louis. And we have a third, which is the online store, which even though 10 years ago, the online store was sort of like a stepchild, now with the current environment, online sales have taken a front seat, if you will. And so I treat it as a whole store that needs to have its proper care and investment and inventory available, since that's one of the main sources of revenue for us these days.
Talk about, if you would, Julio, prior to the pandemic and then post-pandemic, what's happened within your brick and mortar locations?
I think I'm probably similar or consistent to other retailers across the country and around the world, really. We had been on an uptrend, growing our sales year over year with the 2 locations. Already a year ago, July, our online store took an interesting increase. It was just the magic of search engine optimization. People started finding us. And so our sales began to increase dramatically last July. It was starting in July, which was wonderful. So we were seeing growth both on our bricks and mortar stores as well as the online presence. Everything was looking great. We had big plans for the spring of 2020. I even went to a trade show in New York in early February, and we had all these plans and commitments with all our vendors to continue to expand our assortments, introduce new product categories. And then the pandemic hit. So St. Louis and the region mandated no businesses, closing of stores in the middle of March. And so we couldn't sell in our physical location. So the day after we closed, I had to furlough my employees, unfortunately. But I had all this inventory. I had some inventory on its way, and I had other commitments with my vendors. So our vendors have been gracious in working with me and us in terms of staggering deliveries, trying to make the financials work. But what I did, I put all my energy into the online presence by doing, heavy email marketing, doing more social media participation. I was introduced to the whole concept of live videos on Facebook and things like that, so that we can reach a new audience, or just maybe re-energize those who had been our supporters, who were not used to buying online, but yet had no choice. And immediately what we found, obviously the sales plummeted in the bricks and mortar stores, but I increased dramatically our sales online, offering curbside pickup. And believe it or not, I was busier the day after we closed our locations. I was working on average 10 to 12 hours a day, because I turned my one location, which is my larger store, into a distribution center. I didn't even bother unpacking the boxes for my vendors. I would just keep the boxes there, pull the product as the orders would come in. And one thing that was interesting, at least for my business, is that a lot of people came out and said, what can we do to help you? I mean, we don't want you to close. We want to support small businesses and shop small. And so there was a movement, at least from our perspective, in having customers want to help us. So the ideas of selling gift certificates, for example, for later use, or gift cards, and then saying, I could use chocolate and tea and coffee because I'm going to be stuck at home for weeks. Or I could use this, that. And so from our 1,300 SKUs, it became very evident that about 200 of those were things that people were looking for. And it makes sense. They were prioritizing their dollars. There was a lot of uncertainty out there. Many people lost their jobs. So it is expected, I suppose, to see sales decline. But the truth is, people were still spending money, those who have jobs, who were able to work from home. And there's only one winner in this entire unfortunate event, and that is the online giant retailers. I mean, Amazon has shown and has posted double-digit increases since this happened. And we're not surprised. We shouldn't be surprised. This is what people have done. My job was to inform our 2,000 followers on Facebook that we also do have a website, and we have a way to sell online and do porch delivery. If somebody lived within 5 to 7 miles of a store, I would bend over backwards to try to get people excited about shopping online. Would offer sales and promos exclusively online. Then a month after, I think people began a little bit more comfortable with the concept of going and driving to a store and do a curbside pickup. So that was in place. So we're still behind about 50% over last year in our bricks and mortar stores, and our online presence is about 200% up. Obviously, the volume is not quite there to pay all the bills. And so I did what every business owner did. I applied to all government sponsored or small business administration sponsored loans and the PPP loan and all of that.
Were you able to obtain some of that aid for your business?
I didn't want to not take advantage of. So it just took close to 2 months to hear from any of those organizations. As a small business, I think everybody learned that for the PPP loan, at least, banks prioritized the larger accounts they had, people with, or companies with huge pockets, and the little guys like us didn't get a chance. But when the government approved a second round of funding for the PPP, I think that was sort of, they got a slap on the wrist, if you will, for not having supported the smaller businesses. And on the second round, there was a concerted effort. So that's when we were lucky, and we were able to continue our application process. And luckily, we got the funds. That was the timing was perfect, because just when our loan was approved, the city of St. Louis and the state of Missouri officially announced a slow reopening of businesses. We are not at full capacity. We're operating limited hours, but we at least are servicing our customers, at least those who are brave enough to get out there and shop in person. We obviously implemented a very strict mask wearing, hand sanitizer station, using anything that we could do on our side to be responsible and to try to get our customers in the store without jeopardizing anyone's safety.
Sure. I want to talk a little bit about when you first came here to America from your native country of Peru.
That is correct.
You came here, I think, about a couple decades ago.
It's actually 3 now, 3 decades ago.
So 3 decades ago, you came here to this country.
Yes.
When you were here at the time, can you remember what was going through your mind when you first came here?
Yes. I mean, yes. At times it feels like it was yesterday, and at times it feels like it was 3 decades ago. It was June 27th of this year that I celebrated 30 years. So a little bit of background is I actually spent about 8 months in Europe a couple of years before I came to the U.S. So I had this unique privilege of visiting other countries and live in the UK for 4 months and visit 11 countries in Europe. So when I returned home, I felt like I almost didn't belong. I felt like I had grown and I had matured differently, or at least at a different rate as where I grew up in. And somehow I decided, I want to graduate from college and I want to go back to Europe and find a job, get a job, and live a life in Europe. I felt more at home, if you will, in Europe, particularly the UK, which is where I lived for 4 months.
So how do you feel now? You say you're feeling at home somewhere else. How does it feel now?
No, U.S. is my home for sure. We've got my wife and I who've been married for now almost 32 years. We have 2 daughters who are, in their 20s. This is home. I speak to Mom, who lives in Peru, almost weekly, and my siblings and their families, they all live in Peru. So the human side of things, obviously, Peru is still my home in terms of relatives and friends. But in terms of where my career was, where our family has been, it's here, the U.S. Something that anecdotal is people tell you that if you begin dreaming in the language, in English, then that's become home. And that happens to me now. So it didn't happen at first. But so when I first arrived, what I can tell you is it was just a very different country. So different even from Europe. Europe has a lot of this Mediterranean feel, which is what Peru is like. Not huge pieces of land. The U.S. is such a massive country. You can drive across the entire city of St. Louis and it will take you about 30 minutes and you're still within the city limits. that's just the nature of how it is. So one thing that I remember seeing was just how incredibly vast and large of a country it was. Properties, people would own 1, 2, 3 acres of land and, have room for pools and all of this. So the wealth was very, very evident. Even though I had been exposed to wealthy countries in Europe, somehow it didn't seem as obvious. I don't know why. But here in the US, I could tell from the get-go, from the beginning, this income disparity and the people who have and the people who don't have. But at least there's a larger middle-class section, whereas Peru has a very small middle class. So there's a huge poverty line, and then there's smaller middle class, and there's the upper class, maybe the 2% of the population that owns, half of the wealth.
Where does your family fall within that economic bracket?
It would be in the lower, in the poverty line. Mm-hmm. I mean, there are several degrees of poverty, not extreme poverty, of course, but I wouldn't have considered ourselves wealthy. My parents had been renting a home for years. Then my dad inherited a home from his parents, and so we moved into that home. So we were lucky in the way that we, in quote, owned a home. That is a privilege limited to a limited number, but we never owned vehicles and things like that. I had to go to public schools. So I wouldn't have considered myself middle class living in Peru, but certainly had access to public education, both at the high school level as well as college level. Certain degree of ease of access to jobs that would pay you just enough to be able to spend for basics. But it's pretty common in Peru that you live with your family, even though if you're 20, 22, 23, doesn't matter. It's expected. So you don't have that additional expense like rent and buying your groceries. You can be home, but you can contribute to the family pot, if you will, with the money you could make. And I taught English. I taught English as a second language in a center in Peru right after I finished high school. And that was what helped me pay for college. And I was a tax-paying citizen, if you will. But I eventually met my wife, who is American. And she had decided to come to Peru on an exchange program one summer, the summer of 1987. And we met, and then she decided to stay longer and a little longer. And so a 3-month summer exchange became a 3-year living experience for her. And while I was in my last year of college, we decided to get married. So an American woman, a Peruvian guy getting married in Peru. I was just about to finish my college degree. And then it is a time in history in Peru. I don't know if you remember, maybe you were too young, but there was a guerrilla movement called the Shining Path that was terrorizing the country. And this is in the late 80s, just when Kathy, my wife, and I met, when I was finishing college. So as you can imagine, her family in the US was completely worried every single day because all the news had about Peru was a new bombing, a new power tower was destroyed, this many people were killed, et cetera, et cetera. So it was never good news. So when I graduated, I got my degree from university, it was very clear that my wife was ready to come back after 3 years in Peru. And so we came. So I was, again, privileged in the sense that because I was married to an American citizen, I already had a green card, documented immigrant, if you will, coming to the US. And so it was not difficult for me to get a job. I had the luxury of speaking English fairly well. At least I was able to communicate. And I had a college degree. So, I mean, the 3 ingredients that could make a big difference today. And I look around me and I see the hundreds of thousands of people who come to the US with a hope for a better future, and they don't necessarily have the luxury to have those three characteristics. And so they work really hard. They fight every single day to provide a better life for their families.
Through his business, Julio's been able to provide customers with a small glimpse into the lives of people from a vast array of unique cultural experiences. This is something St. Louis is fervently seeking in order to draw in new residents. At one time, the city boasted a population of nearly 1 million people. Today, that population is only around 300,000. As an effort to spur growth, the city launched an initiative through its World Trade Center known as the Mosaic Project. Suzanne Sierra is the senior program manager. So help me understand kind of what the incentive is to help make St. Louis as a city a more welcoming place for immigrants.
Well, the incentive is, really twofold. I mean, it's to enrich St. Louis, to really diversify it, help diversify it. And also it makes good sense from an economic development standpoint. We know that immigrants are more likely to start businesses than native-born, U.S.-born individuals out of necessity, right? And so we want to be sure that when newcomers arrive in St. Louis, they understand that they have the connections, the support, the ecosystem that's going to help them survive. Because if they are successful, they're going to put their roots down, they're going to buy a home here, they're going to send their kids to school in St. Louis, and the direct and indirect benefits are valuable. And so we want to see that multiplied. And that's really what the focus of Mosaic is. It's to help attract immigrants and foreign-born individuals to St. Louis. Our population is declining, and growth has really been coming from the foreign-born, and so we want them to feel welcome here.
In your opinion, do you think that the general public carries that same attitude?
I'd like to think so. So I do this in my work, but then when I talk with my friends and my neighbors and other family members that aren't involved in the work that I do, and I tell them what I do, and they're all so appreciative of it. They think it's a wonderful thing for St. Louis. They then love the multicultural diversity that they do see in St. Louis. So you're always going to have the people that you're never going to please. Fortunately, we have a lot of people that support our vision and our mission and serve as ambassadors, literally as St. Louis Mosaic ambassadors, to help us carry our vision. And so that's where we focus our effort. And the good news is that, there's a lot of support for that. There's a lot of embracing of that.
So help me understand kind of when someone shows up to the city from another part of the world, what's kind of the first step for them typically?
Well, if you think about a person who relocates here, let's say that their spouse was transferred here to work for one of the companies here. So they have professional needs and they have personal needs. And so our goal, we like to say, is that we create professional and social connections so that newcomers, foreign-born newcomers who arrive in St. Louis can really create a sense of belonging so that they can feel like they truly belong here. So in the scenario that I gave you, because St. Louis Mosaic Project has been around now for about 10 years, we have worked very closely and working more and more with the HR departments of various corporations, those companies that do bring in folks from other countries. And so they now know that when they're bringing in a group of newcomers from wherever they're coming, they put them in touch with us. And so again, we can connect them with other spouses that are from other countries. We have this wonderful program called the International Spouse Meetup Group. If the spouse is work authorized and ready to work and they need to figure out, well, where do they go to find and meet people in their industry or just to start to network, we have a professional connector program. So a lot of it is very much one-on-one and word of mouth, as we have really established, as I said, these ambassadors in the community, whether it's corporations or individuals or schools or community partners. They know that they start with us and then we can direct them to where they need to go. So it's a lot of networking and connection.
Well, I hear you talking about the networking and connection, particularly from kind of the corporate world, which makes sense to me because there's that incentive is there very naturally, right? You want to bring people that have qualified skills to be able to work the jobs that you need to for the company, right? So I understand all that. But then what about the folks, because we started off talking about the people that come and that start up their own business of some kind.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
What is that process like?
Right. So that's again, we are very fortunate that the St. Louis Mosaic Project works in tandem with so many community partners. And that includes a lot of our I shouldn't say a lot of, it includes all of our ethnic chambers. So we have the Hispanic chamber, we have a Bosnian chamber, we have an African chamber, and we have an Asian chamber. And we also live in a city where we have the International Institute, which is a refugee resettlement agency. And so I'm saying that to say that if a Mexican American comes here and they learn about the Hispanic Chamber and they become a member there and they say, I want to start a business, the chamber helps them, right, the way that they can, and then they connect them to Mosaic, because the chamber knows that we offer support for immigrant entrepreneurs. And what that looks like depends, again, on the level that that entrepreneur is. So if they're just starting out and they're literally needing to talk to other entrepreneurs, we connect them. We have an arsenal and a database on our website and also just within our connections of individuals who have literally gone that path before them. And so we connect them and say, could you talk to this person and do best practices? If they're looking for really more of a bricks and mortar, we can connect them with resources within our larger economic development agency to guide them to where that might make sense. We can, if they're looking for capital, we connect them with resources that can give them loans or grants, things like that. And then if it's more professional and technical assistance, again, we can connect them to some existing entrepreneurial support organizations that, you know, that is what they do. And they also want to broaden their reach. So it's a really wonderful collaboration of just, you know, a lot of it is, I mean, St. Louis is not unique to this, but a lot of it is who you know, right? And so
right.
We're fortunate that our job, we are essentially a marketing arm for the region. We don't, you know, we don't function as a social service agency, so we don't have deep programs, but what we do is we are catalysts for connection. And by carrying out our mission, which is to amplify how the region is welcoming, and we do that by telling stories, highlighting entrepreneurs who have come here and started from scratch, to talking about the programs we offer, to, you know, giving kudos to our partners. All of that creates this real robust narrative of the collective resource ecosystem that is there. We have very robust social media channels. Again, we're a marketing arm. So one of our goals is to make sure that we are generating publicity in lots of different avenues so that people can see and hear and learn about us. And I would say once a week, I would say that's a good average. One of us in Mosaic gets a phone call. I heard about this. I saw this on social media. Somebody told me to call you. In fact, it just happened last week. So, you know, that hasn't happened overnight, right? Like I said, we've been around for 10 years, but it's a really great example of grassroots. And what do they say? Grassroots and grass tops. You know, so it's coming from the bottom and then
sure, top down.
Yeah, top down, bottom up, right? So
yeah, it's both.
Yes, absolutely.
But you said that it's highly relational. It's all who you know.
A lot of it is, yes, a lot of it is. I mean, St. Louis is known for, we have a lot of generations of families that have lived here. And so I didn't grow up in St. Louis, but it doesn't really matter how old you are here. One of the first questions people will ask you is, where did you go to high school? You know, because it says a lot about where did you grow up, and it just it tells people a lot about you right away without them knowing much about you, if that makes sense. But
yeah, where did you grow up, by the way, just real quick?
I grew up in Wisconsin by way of Tennessee. So my parents they're both from Columbia, South America, and moved to Tennessee for my dad's work. And that's where my siblings and I were born, and then moved to Wisconsin when I was maybe in second grade. And I grew up there. That's where I went to college. And then I slowly started moving more south until I ended up here in St. Louis.
So you've had to do your own work to
I totally
get
did.
networked in.
Yes, in fact, and I share that with people when I am talking about my work, because a lot of what we go back to is the networking component, right? And the connections. And so when I did move here close to 30 years ago, I didn't know anyone and I did not have a job. And back then, my then employer actually allowed me to do some telecommuting, if you will. I mean, we didn't have video, so it was all by phone, but, and I knew that I had to get out there and hit the pavement. So I had my little map of St. Louis and I talked to anybody who would talk to me. And that is literally how I ended up at my first job at Fleischman Hillard, which was really for me like a dream job, but it set my career in motion, really. And so I always talk about how that was what helped me get to where I am today. It was literally talking and asking that person, can you connect me to anybody who can help me with this? And it's funny because I had sent my resume to Fleischman Hillard. That was one of the companies that I had targeted where I wanted to work. And it was just a cold letter to, HR, right? And I got the standard reply, thanks, we'll keep your resume on file. And then through networking, I met someone who said, you ought to talk to so-and-so who lives in your building. He works at Fleischman Hillard. And I said, no, I already got a rejection letter from them. And on a whim, I was leaving town the next day. I went to his apartment and I gave him my resume. And I kid you not that the next day I had a phone call because somebody had left. I was looking to do work in Hispanic marketing, and the number 2 person had just left the agency, and within 2 weeks I was hired. That would not have happened had I not met that person who had been introduced to me by someone else. So I loved whenever people call and say, would you mind talking to my son or my daughter or whoever who just moved, I absolutely do it. So I love that what I get to do is really also reflective of sort of my own personal story.
Yeah. When you said, the reason that you got the job that you did was because somebody else kind of spoke on your behalf and endorsed you, right? So I think ideally you want to find other people that are like that are already somewhat integrated into things, right? And then particularly if they are also perhaps from the same region as, say, another person that comes in, right? So even for you as a Hispanic woman, coming in and perhaps being endorsed by maybe another Hispanic person who's been there for years, already has the relationships. How do you help identify who those people are that can act as sort of those sponsors, those advocates for newcomers?
Well, I mean, again, I would say that it's through just collective work by everyone, certainly in our organization. And let me just back up and say that the St. Louis Mosaic Project is really uniquely positioned because we are an initiative of the World Trade Center of St. Louis. And we both sit under the umbrella of the St. Louis Economic Development Partnership. So we're part of a much bigger organization that works in economic development, right? So by our very nature, we're connecting with companies and again, a lot of community partners that have the same sort of focus or parts of our focus. And so, I can think of several examples just in the last year when literally somebody from Mexico had arrived here. In this case, the spouse was working and the husband, the wife was working and the husband was looking for a job. And he learned of us again through, I think, social media and called me. And my first thought was, I'm going to connect him with the Hispanic Chamber. At the Hispanic Chamber, there are people that are from Mexico. They could relate to his literal move here. And then because of his engineering background, could say, here are some other people to talk to you. And so, in a lot of cases, it's the assumption that because you have that ethnic connection and that relatable human, personal, professional experience that you're going to want to help your brother or sister get to where you are.
While having a shared ethnic connection may be one element of welcoming, having a human connection is something that we all share. When we see each other as brothers and sisters, it helps create virtuous cycles where the work of welcoming can proliferate. For Julio, both the disruptive nature of the pandemic and the animus toward immigrants and people of color has made the country he loves feel incredibly divided. Yet Julio recognizes that his role both as an entrepreneur and as an engaged citizen can help turn things around in his own community.
Today, I mean, to me, it's chaotic. It's crazy. Our daughters feel that this is not the country they grew up in. And it's so clear from this current president that his hate for immigrants and his disdain for foreign-born citizens who are productive and working here is just not the kind of talk and what you want to hear, especially when you know that for our daughters, they know that their father is in fact an immigrant, someone who has worked hard his whole life to realize the American dream, to start a business, a successful business at that. So it is disappointing. You know, you see around you, there's so much hate, there's so much division and so much trouble, but then at the end of the day, you got to be hopeful that something better is coming, something different is going to happen. And this pandemic, if nothing else, I'm hoping has opened the eyes to Americans who have been living under this crystal ball that they feel like they are sheltered from the world, that we are in a little bubble that nobody else can get to us. And yet, with 180,000 and growing number of dead cases in the U.S. alone, in the country that claims to have the best medical service, and all of that, it's just harsh reality. And so I'm hoping that we as Americans, we all take this opportunity to really value who we are as human beings and a little bit, care for each other, take care of each other, and just and grow from this experience as a better nation. Don't know what the future will hold. Obviously, there's still a lot of unknowns, but I am an ever optimistic guy, and I have to believe there is hope in every generation, and there's hope tomorrow, and there will be hope next year. So,
what's next for you as a business owner?
My mission as a fair trade retail business owner is to grow the movement. Fair trade is still, by many measures, in its infancy. It's a business model that really ensures that the people who produce the things we sell are treated as dignified human citizens. They received a fair wage for the work they do. They work in safe, empowering conditions. Gender roles are assigned. There is no machismo. There is no women exploitation. There is no children allowed to work. All the principles that govern fair trade are both important to the humans that are producing what we sell and also taking care of our planet. We're stewards of the environment. So as a fair trader, my goal is to continue to expand the mission and to amplify this. So hearing that you are going to showcase an immigrant business owner that has built a fair trade retail business is music to my ears, because that's the kind of message amplification we all want. And I do what I do because I truly feel that every single day, whenever we sell one item, whatever that is, we know that the person behind the product has had a little bit of a better life, if not for themselves, but for their families or communities, just because they were engaged in fair trade. Today, there is way too much exploitation and modern slavery. It's believed that there are over 2 billion people in this planet, 2 billion with a B, that are working their butts off, and they're making less than $2 a month. I mean, how is that even possible? I'm sorry, $2 a day. How is that even possible? How could you survive in conditions like that? But yet this happens. And there are countries like China and so many others that are using labor as a way to offer products to consumers around the world at the lowest possible price. Because as you can imagine, you can't really change the price of cotton. You can't change the price of the commodities like electricity. You can't change the price of freight. Those are prices that are set by the market. But what you can do is change the price of labor. And when you have people that are desperate, waiting for a job, who come to a factory and are waiting outside in line, the factory owners say, I'll take 100 people today, but this is all I can pay you. And you and I know that is going to be, there's not a legal system that protects people there. And I'm just not talking China. There are many countries in the world that do this. But so what fair trade is ensuring we do is that we treat a human being as a human being, and we pay for their talent, pay for what it takes to produce something. It's like me offering you a job and telling you, come work for me 8 hours and I'll pay you $1 an hour. First of all, you'll never take it, but you'll never take it because you have other opportunities. But secondly, because I will be in trouble under the law. I am violating the law. I'm not following the law. And that is something that I want to continue to promote. And if I change one person's view on how their dollars can make a positive impact in the lives of countless people, I will have succeeded. So what's in the future for me is to work as much as I can and as long as I can to continue to promote the mission of fair trade.
Within your community, you've talked about now this place is home for you. What makes the city of St. Louis, the place that you call home, what makes it feel like a welcoming environment?
Okay, so from the 30 years I've lived in the US, the first 7 were actually in Indianapolis, and that's where I started my career. But a promotion within my job brought us to St. Louis. So it was a little hard at first, but coming to St. Louis, I came with a newer job, a newer opportunity for to continue to develop my career, and obviously provide our family with more opportunities for success and send our children to school, etc. But what I found from the beginning is that St. Louis still, in many ways, like a small town. It is a metro area. Over 2 million people live here, but in many areas, in many places, it feels like a small town. So that was probably one of the first things I noticed. And what I mean by small town, it's pretty neighborhood driven. People tell you, I live in Maplewood, but Maplewood is part of St. Louis. They just like to say Maplewood. Maplewood is a community of many. I live in St. Charles. I live in Webster Groves. I live in the Shaw neighborhood. And so that mentality makes it a little welcoming. You don't feel like you're one in a metro area of over 2 million people. And what we found when we first came to St. Louis, my family and I, my wife and I, we wanted to find a home, not in the suburbs. We wanted to live in a city. We wanted to preserve a home that had been built over 100 years, if we could, restore it, bring it to its full potential, and actually live in a community where we sense we could walk places and we could make friends. Our life in Indianapolis was in the suburbs, and we lived there for 7 years, and we never made friends. It was work, home, and if you had children, you couldn't make friends unless your friends had children as well. So, but that was what life in the suburbs was. So when we came here, we said no to that. We want to choose an area in the city that is closer, that is more intimate, where we can make friends easily. And that's exactly what we did. We found this beautiful home at a time when people will tell you, don't live in that part of the city because it's a little bit dangerous. It's in transition, and there's a lot of poverty. And what they really meant is there are a lot of Black folks who live in homes that are rented, and you don't want to do that. It's kind of dangerous. And we said, no to that. That's exactly what we need to change. We need to change that mentality. We need to be in a community where we can have our children grow up knowing that this is a beautiful tapestry of races and income levels and in identity, whether you're foreign-born, American-born, male, female, straight, gay, whatever. We wanted them to have that experience. And so when I said it was welcoming, it was because we chose that. That was a concerted effort. And we found exactly what we hoped. We made tons of friends who, as you're new in the area, are very helpful. They open their homes. They show you the ropes, if you will. So while I was holding a job that was good and offered many opportunities for growth, we also found this, what seemed to be a more caring kind of community. And that is because we chose that. I'm sure that if we had chosen to live in the suburbs, in a huge place where people just come and go, we might not have had that experience.
Right. So what I hear you saying there, Julio, about welcoming being more of a conscious decision, a conscious choice, if you will, to think about how not only what you're going to bring to the community, but what you're going to get out of the community where you live.
That is exactly right. You said it better than I did. It's a choice we made. And I think we were lucky enough to make that choice because we had a somewhat negative experience when we lived in Indianapolis before we came here. And I think when we lived in Indianapolis, we began to see at least this income disparity, the haves and the have-nots.
Where did you live in Indianapolis, by the way? Because I'm from there. I grew up there, so I'm just curious.
In the Castleton Square Mall. If
oh,
you go
sure, yeah, north side,
between Fishers and Noblesville, somewhere in that area.
Yep.
And that is simply because, as my friends told us, we arrived in Indianapolis. My wife's dad lived there at the time, and he had a condominium on 96th and Masters by Castleton Square. And then it is pretty clear, this is where you are. This is America, and you feel that that's what the U.S. is like. But really, there are these beautiful homes in all parts of town that don't get that love and care. And so we followed like sheep. We followed instructions and suggestions, and we ended up finding another condo somewhere in Fishers. So again, very far away from city, from true community. And so coming to St. Louis, we didn't want that. We went exactly the opposite. And when you live closer to the city, you still have these pockets of neighborhoods where you've seen a transition. I guess you call it gentrification is the term that people are using now. But, back 22 years ago, the area we chose to live had homes that were unbelievably exquisite. They just needed a lot of care. The shell was perfect on the outside, but the inside had been not cared for years and years. And there was mixed income. There were people of all races. There were people of all income levels. And that's what we wanted. The neighborhood we chose, there was also a school, a Catholic school, a parochial school within walking distance. That's where our daughters ended up going to at least through 8th grade. And then they went to public school after that. So we were lucky enough to have that. So when I say welcoming, it's welcoming from that perspective.
Excellent. Julio, I appreciate you taking the time, sir. Very great to talk with you. Wonderful things that you said.
Of course.
Yes. So thank you very much. Hey, everyone. Thanks for listening to the podcast. Remember to support our show so we can keep bringing the most unique content featuring the world's realest entrepreneurs. Go to our website, GigRoots.co, where you can find more episodes, give a donation to the show, and stay up to date with the latest news. Be sure to subscribe to this channel for more great content. Right now is the time to celebrate marketplace diversity and to support grassroots economics. We'll see you next time.